I remember a guy pulling a gun on me right outside of the plant, and I was so crazy. I asked him had he kissed his mother that morning, because if he missed the opportunity, he wasn't gonna get another chance. That side of my life served me, all because of how passionate I was about God. I think my possibilities were pretty clear to me. When my family broke up, that was when my destiny got challenged. Because like any kid, we moved from a very Tony neighborhood into the projects. And moving into the projects changed. I was not initially ready for those conditions. So I started getting some other influences. But having my grandmother and grandfather living around the corner kept me kind of monitored. I never was a kid who, at that point in my life, I never was a kid who would be disrespectful or behave disrespectfully. I wasn't one of those, let me see if I can get away with kids. Probably because I had too much responsibility, taking care of my brother. My mom was working. I had to maintain the house and make lunch and all that kind of stuff till she got home. And it wasn't until we moved to Philadelphia, in the West Philly, that I started getting exposed to another group. Because at that time, Chester, Pennsylvania was still the suburbs with a few issues in the projects. I came from a project that we never locked our doors in the summertime. I came from a project where we slept out in the backyard all summer because there was no air conditioning and nobody ever bothered you. And the back door was open all night so we could go in and out and go to the bathroom. That was the kind of neighborhood we lived in. We would go shopping and leave the house open because you didn't want a hot house when you got back. So that was the environment I was raised in. That was the projects where we were. So we get to West Philly, wonderful neighborhood, but a few blocks north or south, they have some other stuff going on. So I get in public school in Philadelphia, and rather than having a fight twice a year, you're being threatened with violence every day. So I think what happened, there was a shift to a side of me that had been kind of repressed. And that was the side that I did enjoy fighting. I wouldn't start anything, but the policy in our family was finish it. If you started it, you were in trouble. But if you were able to say, they hit me first, they pushed me first, you were in good stead. And my mindset started to change to kind of a survival mindset. So, I got recruited for a gang, but I was more afraid of my mother's gang than I was of their gang. So I had to go and pass the initiation and then not join. They came to my house to get me for the initiation. We need to see you. I went around the corner, fought 10 guys from the smallest to the largest. First 7 guys was nothing. The last 3 guys took something. And then me and the runner of the gang, the leader of the gang, we fought to a standstill. And then it was like, okay, you don't have to join. Although they wanted me, but there was a guy in the gang that caused it because I was going with his sister and he didn't like it. And name was Daryl. He didn't like it, and just found out that Debbie died not long ago. And that's why the start with the Creek gang. That was the gang that I was at odds with. And my mom sent me to boarding school to get me out of West Philly. And that got me back on the right path. I didn't want to go. Had she not sent me, would have never discovered that I could run track, would have never discovered that I could wrestle, would never have discovered that I could run cross country, would never have discovered that I could work a farm and like it, would never have been able to go to any university I wanted to from that school. But I chose an HBCU because I was one of 6 minority students in a 660 person school. And I had, enough. I needed to be around my own culture, get immersed again. And that's why I went to Lincoln. But at the time, Lincoln was called the Black Princeton. So it was a very difficult education. But, that side of my life served me even when I started working. Because I was working at Tasty Cake in Philly all the way through college and into my first two or 3 years of professional life. I kept the job. But during the years I was working and going to school, all that fighting and stuff that came in. I had guns pulled on me. I had, just guys trying to steal my car when I came out to the parking lot. And, I was kind of, I was like a Jekyll and Hyde, to be honest about it. I wouldn't start it, but I used to get a real good sensation when I punched somebody in the face. I loved it. Something would go up my arm. It was like I was out there. But I remember a guy pulling a gun on me right outside of the plant, and I was so crazy. I asked him had he kissed his mother that morning, because if he missed the opportunity, he wasn't gonna get another chance. He looked at me like, yo. I think back on that thing, I had no concern for my personal safety because I thought I was faster than most, stronger than most at the time. And, we were taught to be good with our hands. My dad was a black belt. So his name's on the wall in West Philly at East Coast Karate. So we could handle ourselves. So I wasn't afraid. But it got me in some tight places. But God obviously had a plan for me, because one summer, 78 young people got killed. 78 one summer. Over June, July, and August, 78 young folk got killed. And I was in a few parties where some of them got killed, but I didn't. So it was, I lived a full life. So when God saved me, He really saved me from something. I didn't get saved from stealing hubcaps. I got saved from violence and situations where I saw people die, saw people shot and stabbed. I witnessed that stuff. So it was He really delivered me. I'm still amazed. So when I got to Church Farm, I saw that a lot of minority students were being grossly treated, prejudicial, name calling, that kind of thing. I remember the first time I was tested with that. I'd come out of the shower. Wide World of Sports was on television. We were in the community room. Everybody's watching. So I walked in and I was combing my hair. And one of the students said, "Do you really have to do that?" So I said, "I don't know what you mean." He said, "Do you really have to comb your hair?" So I looked at the Taylor brothers who were sitting on the sofa. And I said, "Did you hear what he said to me?" So they were like, so I said, "Should I slap him now or later?" They said, "You're going to slap him for that?" And before they could get the words out of their mouth, "Damn!" "What's wrong, Evie? Do you have to comb your hair?" "Yeah, I got to comb." Walked out of the room. So John and them came to see me. And "Why'd you hit him for that?" I said, "He was insulting the fact that I'm an African-American student. I'm black." And they had gotten so used to the prejudice that they were letting everything roll off their backs. Well, there was a little overexpression of oppression. We went on the warpath. And the headmaster called me to the office one afternoon, and my mother was sitting in the office. And he began to tell her what was going on and said that he couldn't prove it, but he thought I was the ringleader. Well, I was. I thought I was a little Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown type of guy, MLK in his youth, So my mom's sitting there, and the headmaster's talking to me. He says, Evie, they used to call me, "I need you to bring a halt to this." So I went straight into negotiations. He never had this conversation. I said, we're not going to be called this name. We're not going to be called that name. We're not going to be disrespected. We won't have our stuff stolen. I won't write down the list. And he said, I'll guarantee that won't happen anymore. I'll make an announcement, but I need you to stop it. I said, okay. So that was my first negotiation for equality in my lifetime. And I think I was 15. And so I stopped the rebellion. He made the announcement in study hall the next day, kicked the latest two offenders out of school at that moment. Used to have this say, hit the pike, it means you're out of here. And so the whole thing quieted down. And they tell me that lasted throughout the rest of the school's history. But I was the Black Panther at my school. So Maya's like, what? So in that conversation, the headmaster, Mr. Schreiner, he said, we're not able to pin anything on your son. And he's never had a demerit. He's never been on punishment. We've never had a problem out of him. And he said to my mother, he's either awfully good or awfully slick. And my mother, Wilma Evans Robinson, said, I can guarantee you it's not good. I said, Mom. She said, I guarantee you he's not awfully good. Headmaster sat back and looked. My mother had thrown me under the bus. I was like, I'll never forget that day. It was a culture shock at first. I hadn't been around that many black people in like 2 years. And very, very intense learning. A lot of rules. Freshmen couldn't walk on the grass. Freshmen had to, move off the pavement when seniors were coming. I mean, it was old school. So I get there, and I'm like, and I understood it because the seniors ran the boarding school. So we were like the authority, and we took advantage of our authority at times. Most of the time, to be honest. So when I got to school, I understood the whole hazing thing and seniors and juniors being in charge. But I had a sense that it wasn't the right thing. So I tried to pledge Q, and I was online, but I got in trouble because they tried to break the line, and we sent 3 or 4 big brothers to the infirmary. I was wrestling at the time, and I had won a championship in high school, came to college, and was doing all that stuff. So we were throwing people like they were rag dolls, and so we kind of rebelled. We are the class 73 is the class that rebelled against the structure of oppression against freshmen, to the point that we were fighting all over the campus in groups, raiding people's rooms, just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But the oppression of freshmen stopped the first semester I got there. And yours truly was part of the insurrection. I went to the restaurant business. I was a fraction. I was the franchise owner. They call it a fraction of the action. So I took over a restaurant that had been closed by the Board of Health. Renovated it, cleaned it up, opened it, and God gave us favor. I got saved while I was in the restaurant business. God gave us favor, and I made Black Enterprise magazine twice. They advertised the restaurant twice in there, talking about careers, African Americans, and I didn't know I was in the magazine until a friend of mine was flying back from California, and she was going through the magazine, and she said she got 2 pages in. Cynthia Jeter, and she said, "No." She said it out loud. "No, it can't be." She went back, and as soon as she got to a phone back then, of course there were no cell phones at that time. As soon as she got to a payphone, she called me. She said, "So-and-so, what are you doing?" She didn't call me Dave. "So-and-so, what are you doing in Black Enterprise Magazine?" I said, "I didn't know I was in there." But by the time I got home, my mother had they had sent her like 5 copies. She walking down the neighborhood showing people, "My son, my son, my son." But we had an enormous success. But while I was in the restaurant business, I got saved. And the restaurant business requires vigilance. I had to be there nights, weekends, because I was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We took the restaurant from closed to like $1.2 million a year in about a year and a half. Excellent service, 258 seats, the whole 9 yards, and 24 hours a day. So we made that history, and then I got saved. I had a problem because the restaurant was preventing me from coming to church. And I walked away from it because I knew that I could not serve God without being connected. For me, I could not miss church and be strong. I couldn't become a disciple and be strong. So I searched for a job that gave me my nights, my weekends, and my holidays off. Banking was the obvious career. But I went from making double 6 figures down to like $28,000 a year. Fortunately, I had saved a lot of money and went into the program, loan officer training program. First minority in the program. Revolutionized the program, rewrote the program while I was in it because it wasn't giving us what we needed. It was like those who could survive made it, and those who couldn't got, so we lost a lot of good people because they had no system. So got that, had this meteoric rise in banking, and then God called me to pastor, and I walked away from the banking. Country clubs, boardrooms, executive dining rooms, traveling, customers all up and down the Northeast, and I knew I couldn't do it and stay there. So I gave that up for God, and wouldn't recommend that to everybody. But I heard his voice clearly, and I know it was his voice because I never went without. Although I was on unemployment, I never known what that was about, and because I'd never been on it, I thought unemployment just lasted as long as you weren't working. So I go down to the unemployment because they used to have to go get your check, and it wasn't that I needed it; it was that I was due it. So I went and got the check, signed for it, and the lady said, "By the way, this is your last check." I'm like, "What do you mean? This is your last check?" I said, "I thought you got it as long as you weren't working." No. This is your last check. So I'm like, oh boy. I get in the car, drive back home to my apartment, and I'm like in a daze. Well, I had been out a while, so during the time I was out, I would, do these soft searches. I'd call somebody, "What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?" And I got home that day, phone rings. "Oh, we'd like you to come in for an interview." I said, "Oh." This is before I started working in the bank. They said, "We'd like you to come for an interview." I said, "Okay." So I go down, got this position, this is all we're going to pay you. They didn't know I had money saved up. So I'm like, all right, let me think about it. So I'm on my way home and they call me. "We want to get you a job." Okay. So I walk into this assistant vice president position, which led me to be a vice president. And I became maybe one of 6 black vice presidents in the country in commercial lending, of 3 of the top 13 banks in the world. So I go from, and the only thing I can attribute it to is I tithed on my unemployment check. $11.62 I paid in tithe a week. And people tried to tell me God would understand if I didn't. I didn't understand if I didn't. So I tithed on the check, and I walk out of the unemployment office and walk into a job. How does that happen? And that tithe, I believe, was the foundation for, me doing stuff in banking that minorities in this area hadn't done before. And I really attribute it to that faithfulness, But I do see why people get hung up on welfare and stuff, because it was wonderful sleeping till like 10 o'clock in the morning and watching TV half the night. And I had a little money, so I'm going shopping downtown twice a week. I was living the life, man. Skin cleared up. It was amazing. I had been to, some people my age will remember this, the library on City Line Avenue. And it was a Friday night, it was a Saturday night. And I'd gone in to the club, stayed till it was over, and the flow was go to the library, it closes at 2, the Marriott was across the street, you go over there, you have breakfast, and normally you met some company. Okay, so call it company. Yes, met some company. So I went over to the Marriott. I'm sitting in the booth by myself. Ladies are coming in because it's time to go get breakfast. And I'm like pushing everybody off. So I finish eating my breakfast and I go home. I get home around 3:30. And what was weird was I didn't feel like I was in the right place that night. I hadn't been to the club in like 4 or 5 weeks. And I was a regular there. There, Cafe Erlanger, Hippopotamus, and over here, Columbo's. So those were my spots. My eyes looking like, yo. Those are my spots. So, I leave there alone. I go home. I get home about 3:30, I think. I get to sleep around 4. And 6 a.m., my eyes popped open. Call my mom. So, of course, your son, who's not saved, call you on the phone 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm either hurt, in jail, in some kind of trouble. So when I called, I said, hey, Mom. And she was like, I could hear her holding her breath. And she said, yes. I said, are you going to church this morning? She said, what? I said, are you going to church this morning? She says, yeah. You want me to come get you? I said, no. I said, just tell me where you're going to be and I'll be there. I never wrote one word to my mother. So it wasn't like I'm going to come and not show up. So tell me where you're going to be. I'll meet you there. So there was this Brotherhood Breakfast Association in Delaware County where every Sunday they met at another church at 7 o'clock in the morning. Sermon, breakfast, going to your regular church. So I met her there, and this guy, John Newman, the pastor that's married to Amarosa, he was preaching, and John was I was older than John. I think I was 26. John probably was around 24, maybe 23. Well, he's preaching. I never heard anything like it. Articulate, presence, the whole 9 yards. That morning, I decided to give my life to Christ. 3 weeks later, I joined my mother's church. That's been the rest of my life since then. John came here to do communion for us. And somehow, we had never shared that story. And when I was up introducing him, it dawned on me, he doesn't know what I'm about to say. And I testified to the church, you're about to hear the man that preached and got me saved. And I saw his head drop, and when his head came up, tears were coming out of his eyes. And he said, it blesses me to know that I was partially responsible for this happening to you. And we've had a closeness because he was the one that God used to lead me to the Lord. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. I was working the cleaning business, and we were pretty successful. First minority vendor at Tasty Cake, first minority vendor at Nabisco, first minority vendor of record at Philadelphia Electric, Delaware Division. I think there was another guy that had Philly. I had the Delaware Division. So we were able to, and I started as a subcontractor. I started with 2 contracts and started to, expand and expand and kept expanding until, we had a $1 million business going on. And employed about 60 people and just, did some great work in some of the most established businesses around the area. And had been in it for a while. And about 1989 or 88, God told me, I'll give you, 90. He said, I'll give you 3 years to get out. No, 96. I worked it for 6 years and pastored the church. I'll give you 3 years to get out. Well, 93, somewhere now. I'm losing time. So anyway, he gave me 3 years, and the day that I quit, the day that I had marked as my last day, the biggest contract offer that I had in the history of the business called. That day. So I'm sitting at my desk in Camden. I had an office in Camden. And the phone rings, and it's a local university. And they say, we heard about you. We want to give you this business, and this is what we're going to pay you. You're going to have to bring your employees up to the university level of salary. We're going to buy all the equipment that you need for the university. We know you don't have the equipment to buy for all these buildings because we need you to have something in every building that we have. I mean, it was sweetheart. I broke out in flop sweat sitting there. Sweat just came pouring down my face because I know what God told me. And I talked to the guy. I said, this is quite a surprise. Do you mind if I call you back? He said, no, call me back. I said, I'll call you back in a few minutes. I sat there at my desk. Sometimes when things happen, you can start to rehear God, but I didn't rehear him. I'm like, called the guy back. I said, I need you to understand, I'm a pastor, and I heard God tell me to get out, and I have to leave, and today was the day that I was going to close my office. And he said, I understand. I didn't know he was saved. I hung the phone up, started sweating some more, because I waited for that kind of contract. And once again, I gave it up to do this. And now that we're talking about it, there's been those 3 major junctures. The unemployment thing, the coming out of banking and going into the janitorial business, and then leaving the janitorial business, all because of how passionate I was about God. I don't know too many people that give up $1 million business to pastor a church. And I wasn't looking for the church to supply the income that the business was giving, but I just needed to be able to provide. And when I look back on it, that was some heck of a faith.